The coffee maker in Dr. Milos Krensky's office made strange gurgling sounds as it prepared his third cup of the day. Outside his window, the Galactic University station slowly rotated through space, bringing different star systems into view every few hours. Milos had been teaching xenobiology here for 8 years, and he thought he had seen every possible research request from his students. He was wrong. The door chimed, and 4 of the most unusual graduate students he had ever supervised filed into his cramped office. Leading them was Quinn, an Alterian whose pale blue skin and large black eyes made him look perpetually worried. Behind him came Nex, a crystalline being whose body caught and reflected the office lights in rainbow patterns. Borax followed, moving, with the strange coordinated movements that all hive-minded species displayed. Finally, Tala entered, her thick fur already beginning to show the seasonal changes that meant her species would soon enter their monthly hibernation cycle. Professor Krensky, Quinn began in his careful, precise way of speaking, we have come to request permission for our final research project. Milos leaned back in his chair and gestured for them to sit. Only Quinn and Tala could use the standard chairs. Nex simply positioned himself near the wall, while Borax settled into what looked like a meditation pose on the floor. What did you have in mind? Milos asked, taking a sip of his coffee. Quinn pulled out a datapad and cleared his throat. We wish to study human sleep patterns. Our thesis committee has approved the topic, but we need a human supervisor to access subjects and facilities. Milos nearly choked on his coffee. Sleep patterns? That seems rather basic for graduate-level research. Nex's crystalline structure chimed softly, which Milos had learned meant he was speaking. The universal translator kicked in a moment later. That is precisely why we chose it, Professor. Sleep is one of the most fundamental biological processes, yet each species does it differently. We want to document the simple, straightforward way humans rest. It should be easy to observe and record, Borax added, their multiple voices speaking, in harmony. Unlike our complex hive rest cycles or Tala's seasonal hibernation, human sleep appears to be a basic daily function. Tala nodded, her ears twitching with what Milos recognized as academic excitement. My research into your species suggests humans simply lie down, become unconscious for approximately 8 hours, then wake up. Very straightforward biological maintenance. Milos set down his coffee cup and studied the 4 eager faces looking at him. In all his years of teaching, he had never seen students so confident about what they thought would be a simple project. A small part of him wanted to warn them that humans were never as simple as they seemed, but another part was curious to see what would happen. What exactly do you want to observe? He asked. Quinn consulted his notes. Basic sleep behaviors, duration, physical positioning, any sounds or movements. We plan to use standard monitoring equipment to record brain activity, heart rate, and body temperature. Very non-invasive. We have already designed our observation protocols, Nex added, his structure brightening with enthusiasm. Subjects will sleep in their normal environment while we monitor from a separate room. We estimate 2 weeks of data collection will be sufficient. The goal is to create a comprehensive baseline study of Deathworlder rest patterns, Borax explained. This research could be valuable for future human integration into mixed species environments. Milos had to admit the project sounded reasonable. Sleep studies were common in xenobiology, and his students seemed to have thought through the ethics and methodology. The humans living on the station were always willing to help with harmless research, especially the graduate students and junior faculty who understood the academic process. I can arrange for volunteers from the human residents, he said finally, but I want daily reports on your progress, and if anything unusual happens, you contact me immediately. The 4 students exchanged what Milos interpreted as relieved glances. Quinn carefully stored his data pad and stood up. Thank you, Professor. We will begin setting up our equipment tomorrow. This research will be a valuable addition to the xenobiology database. and it will be refreshingly simple after some of the more complex projects we have attempted," Tala added, stretching her arms above her head. After the students left, Milos sat in his office finishing his coffee and watching the stars slowly wheel past his window. He had a strange feeling he was missing something important, but he could not put his finger on what it might be. The research seemed straightforward enough, and his students were capable and responsible. Later that afternoon, he walked down to the residential quarters to speak with potential volunteers. The human section of the station housed about 30 people, mostly researchers, graduate students, and support staff. He found Tom working in the hydroponics lab, Maya reviewing data in the library, and Dev practicing guitar in one of the recreational areas. "Sleep study?" Tom asked, wiping dirt from his hands on a towel. "Sure, why not? Sounds easy enough." Maya looked up from her holographic displays. "Will it interfere with my research schedule?" "Not at all," Milos assured her. "You just sleep?" "Normally while they monitor from another room." Dev set down his guitar and grinned. "As long as they don't mind my snoring, I'm in. When do we start?" Within an hour, Milos had recruited 6 volunteers, all eager to help with what they assumed would be a simple, boring study. He sent their names to Quinn along with their room assignments and schedules. That evening, he ran into Quinn in the station cafeteria. The Altarian was carefully eating what looked like synthesized plant matter while reviewing his research notes. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Milos asked. Quinn nodded enthusiastically. "All equipment is calibrated and positioned. We have reviewed human circadian rhythm data and prepared our observation schedules. This will be an excellent learning experience." "I'm sure it will be," Milos replied, though something in the back of his mind still nagged at him. As he walked back to his quarters that night, Milos tried to remember if he had ever actually explained human sleep to non-human students before. Most of his classes focused on more exotic topics like radiation adaptation or pressure tolerance. Sleep had always seemed too mundane to warrant much discussion. He made a mental note to check on the research team tomorrow, just to make sure everything was going smoothly. After all, what could possibly go wrong with watching humans sleep? The monitoring station hummed quietly in the darkness as Quinn adjusted the sensors for the 3rd time that evening. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see into 3 separate quarters where human volunteers had begun their sleep cycles 2 hours ago. Everything had started exactly as predicted. The subjects laid down, closed their eyes, and became still. Quinn had been pleased with how smoothly the research was progressing. Then Tom started moving. "Next, are you recording?" "This?" Quinn whispered, though there was no need to be quiet in their soundproof observation room. The crystalline being's structure pulsed with soft light as he focused his sensors on the first subject. "Yes, but I do not understand what we are observing. The subject appears to be malfunctioning." Through the window, Tom had risen from his bed and was walking toward his door with his eyes completely closed. His movements were slow and unsteady, nothing like the purposeful stride Quinn had observed during the day. "Perhaps he is experiencing some form of neurological episode," Borax suggested, their collective voices tense with worry. "Should we alert medical staff?" "Wait," Tala said, her sensitive ears tracking Tom's movements through the station corridors via the audio monitors. "Let us observe for a few more minutes before taking action." The 4 researchers watched in growing alarm as Tom navigated through the station's hallways, past other residential quarters, and into the central cafeteria. His eyes remained closed, yet somehow he avoided obstacles and doorways with uncanny precision. "This is definitely abnormal behavior," Quinn muttered, making rapid notes on his datapad. Unconscious navigation suggests severe dissociation from normal cognitive function. In the cafeteria, Tom began opening storage compartments and retrieving various ingredients. Still with his eyes closed, he started what appeared to be an elaborate cooking process. He chopped vegetables with frightening accuracy, activated multiple cooking surfaces, and began preparing what looked like a complex meal. "He is using sharp instruments while unconscious," Nex observed, his crystalline structure flickering with distress patterns. "This poses extreme danger to his physical safety." Meanwhile, in the second observation window, Maya had begun exhibiting her own concerning behaviors. She thrashed violently in her bed, her limbs moving as if fighting off attackers. Her heart rate, displayed on the monitoring equipment, had spiked dramatically. "She appears to be under attack," Borax said, rising from their meditation pose. "But there is no one else in the room." Maya's movements became more intense. She rolled across the bed, fell onto the floor with a loud thud, and continued what looked like combat maneuvers against invisible enemies. The room's automated safety systems activated, flooding the space with soft emergency lighting and triggering medical alert protocols. "Two subjects experiencing simultaneous neurological crises," Quinn said, his voice rising with panic. "This cannot be coincidental." The third window showed Dev, who had remained stationary in his bed, but had begun speaking loudly and clearly. The audio monitors picked up his voice addressing someone who was not there. "No, I already told you I'm not interested in dating your sister," Dev said to the empty room. "She smells like fish and makes those weird clicking sounds when she eats." Tala's ears perked up. "He is having a conversation with an invisible entity. This suggests severe hallucination or possible contact with interdimensional beings." "I never said anything about your cooking," Dev continued, his voice growing more agitated. "Look, just because I don't like mushroom soup doesn't mean I'm insulting. Your entire family—" The conversation continued for several minutes, with Dev apparently arguing with multiple invisible people about various personal topics. He revealed embarrassing details about his childhood, complained about his job performance reviews, and discussed his fear of small spaces in remarkable detail. "He is divulging sensitive personal information to unknown entities," Nex observed. "This represents a severe security breach as well as evidence of psychological breakdown." Back in the cafeteria, Tom had completed his cooking project and was now serving the elaborate meal onto multiple plates. The monitoring showed that his brain activity remained in sleep patterns despite his complex actions. Motor function completely disconnected from conscious awareness, Quinn noted, his hands shaking as he recorded observations. "This is far more serious than simple sleep disorders." Maya's room had triggered 3 more emergency alerts as her violent movements caused her to collide with furniture and walls. Each impact sent new alarms through the station's medical monitoring systems. "We must intervene," Borax declared. "These subjects are experiencing severe medical emergencies. They could cause permanent damage to themselves or others." Before Quinn could respond, his communicator chimed with an emergency signal. Dr. Krensky's voice came through, sounding concerned but not panicked. "Research team, I'm getting medical alerts from your observation subjects. Status report, please." Quinn looked at his fellow researchers, all of whom appeared equally distressed by what they had witnessed. "Professor, we are observing multiple simultaneous neurological crises. Subject 1 is performing complex tasks while unconscious and using dangerous equipment. Subject 2 is experiencing violent physical episodes. Subject 3 is communicating with invisible entities and revealing classified personal information." There was a long pause before Dr. Krensky responded. "I'll be right there. Don't do anything until I arrive." 20 minutes later, Dr. Krensky entered the observation room to find 4 very worried alien students monitoring their human subjects. Tom had finished cooking and returned to his room, where he climbed back into bed without ever opening his eyes. Maya had exhausted herself and was now lying still, though her monitors showed elevated stress hormones. Dev had concluded his argument with invisible people and was making soft snoring sounds. "Professor, you must see these recordings," Quinn said urgently. "The subjects require immediate medical intervention." We have documented unprecedented neurological anomalies affecting multiple individuals simultaneously. Dr. Krensky looked at the monitoring displays, then at the windows showing 3 peacefully sleeping humans. A slow smile spread across his face. "Oh no," he said quietly. "What do you mean, oh no?" Tala asked. "I think," Dr. Krensky said, rubbing his forehead, "we need to have a longer conversation about human sleep patterns than I originally thought." The 4 alien researchers looked at each other with growing confusion as their human supervisor began reviewing their carefully documented observations of what they were certain represented a medical crisis of unprecedented proportions. Outside, the observation windows, Tom, Maya, and Dev continued sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that their normal human sleep behaviors had just convinced 4 alien graduate students that the entire human species was suffering from severe neurological disorders. The observation laboratory had been completely reconfigured for what Quinn insisted on calling a controlled group sleep study. 6 sleeping mats were arranged in a circle on the floor, surrounded by more monitoring equipment than had ever been, assembled in one place on the station. Dr. Krensky had tried to explain that the previous night's observations were normal human behaviors, but the alien research team remained convinced they were studying a serious medical condition. "If these neurological episodes are as common as you suggest," Quinn had argued, "then observing multiple subjects simultaneously will help us understand the scope of the crisis." Now, as evening approached, 6 human volunteers gathered in the laboratory. Emma, a physics graduate student, bounced on her toes as she examined the monitoring equipment. Roy, who worked in station maintenance, kept asking technical questions about the sensors. Zoe, a linguistics researcher, chattered excitedly in 3 different languages about the study. Ben, usually quiet and reserved, seemed nervous about being observed while sleeping. Tom and Maya, veterans of the previous night's crisis, had volunteered again out of curiosity. "Just sleep normally," Dr. Krensky told the volunteers. "Ignore the equipment and the observers." The 4 alien researchers positioned themselves at monitoring stations around the room's perimeter. They had prepared emergency medical protocols, communication links to the station's health center, and detailed observation forms for documenting what they expected to be a night of unprecedented scientific discovery. "Remember," Quinn instructed his team, "document everything. Multiple subjects may provide data about the progression and intensity of these sleep-related disorders." The humans settled onto their mats and began their normal bedtime routines. Emma did stretching exercises. Roy checked his alarm for tomorrow's early shift. Zoe practiced pronunciation of some complex alien phonemes she was studying. Ben lay very still and tried to ignore the sensors pointed at him. Within an hour, all 6 subjects had fallen asleep. The alien researchers monitored their brain patterns, noting the transition from consciousness to what they still believed was a form of temporary neurological dysfunction. Then, the chaos began. Emma was the first to move. She sat up abruptly, her eyes closed, and began making rapid punching and kicking movements as if fighting off multiple attackers. Her limbs moved with surprising speed and precision, and she rolled across the floor while maintaining complex combat positions. "Subject 1 is experiencing violent hallucinations," Nex reported, his crystalline structure pulsing with alarm patterns. "She appears to be engaged in physical combat with multiple unseen entities." Emma's movements became more intense. She performed what looked like advanced martial arts techniques, complete with spinning kicks and defensive blocks. One particularly energetic kick connected with a monitoring stand, sending expensive equipment crashing to the floor. "She has damaged our instruments while unconscious," Borax observed. "This suggests the hallucinations may have enhanced physical strength as a symptom." Before they could process this development, Roy began his contribution to the night's events. He rose from his mat and walked directly to the laboratory's environmental controls, his eyes completely closed. With the confidence of someone who worked with these systems every day, He began adjusting gravity settings. Subject 2 is accessing critical station systems while unconscious, Tala reported, her fur standing on end with distress. He could compromise life support for the entire laboratory. Roy's unconscious expertise proved problematic when he reduced the room's gravity to roughly 1/4 normal. Everyone not strapped down began floating gently toward the ceiling, including the sleeping humans, the monitoring equipment, and 3 of the 4 alien observers. "Emergency! Emergency!" Quinn shouted as he drifted upward, his data pad spinning away from him. "Subject has compromised artificial gravity. All personnel are now airborne." Nex, being crystalline and therefore heavier, remained anchored to the floor, but his carefully calibrated sensors were now pointing in random directions as their stands floated freely around the room. In the reduced gravity, Emma's sleep fighting became even more spectacular. She performed impossible aerial maneuvers, spinning and kicking while floating through the air, occasionally colliding with walls or ceiling panels. Meanwhile, Zoe had begun talking in her sleep, but her linguistic expertise made her sleep talking particularly complicated. She spoke rapidly in Standard Galactic, then switched to Ancient Centaurian, then to a dialect of Rigelian that even the universal translators struggled to process. "Can anyone understand what Subject 3 is saying?" Borax asked while trying to grab onto a floating chair for stability. The universal translator sparked and made concerning electronic noises as it attempted to keep up with Zoe's rapid language switching. She began discussing quantum physics in mathematical notation, complained about the cafeteria food in poetic verse, and recited what sounded like a grocery list in an extinct ceremonial language. "The translation systems are overloading," Nex reported from his position on the floor. "Subject 3 is exceeding the linguistic processing capabilities of our equipment." Ben's contribution to the chaos was initially less dramatic, but equally concerning to the alien observers. He had developed sleep paralysis, a condition where his mind partially woke while his body remained in sleep mode. He lay completely motionless, but with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling with an expression of apparent terror. "Subject 4 has become completely paralyzed while maintaining visual awareness," Quinn called out while floating near the ceiling. "This represents complete motor system failure while consciousness remains partially active." Ben's eyes tracked the floating chaos around him, but he could not move or speak. To the alien researchers, he appeared to be conscious, but trapped in his own non-functional body. Tom and Maya, meanwhile, had begun their own sleep performances. Tom started his sleepwalking routine, but in reduced gravity, which turned his usually careful navigation into a series of slow-motion bounces off walls and floating furniture. Maya resumed her violent sleep movements, but now she performed them while slowly rotating through the air, creating a spinning display of combat techniques that looked like some sort of aerial dance. 6 subjects, 6 different neurological malfunctions, Quinn observed as he tried to right himself while floating. "This is a species-wide epidemic of sleep disorders." The floating chaos continued for another hour. Emma knocked over more equipment while sleep fighting in zero gravity. Roy unconsciously adjusted more environmental controls, causing the room temperature to fluctuate wildly. Zoe's multilingual sleep-talking overwhelmed another universal translator, which began producing random beeping sounds instead of attempted translations. When Roy finally returned the gravity to normal, everyone and everything crashed back to the floor in a heap of tangled bodies, monitoring equipment, and very confused alien researchers. "Medical emergency," Borax declared from underneath a pile of sensor arrays. "All subjects have experienced simultaneous gravitational displacement trauma." The humans, still asleep, simply readjusted their positions and continued their various sleep behaviors as if nothing had happened. Emma stopped fighting and curled up peacefully. Roy made his way back to his mat without ever opening his eyes. Zoe switched to quiet murmuring in only one language. Ben's paralysis ended and he rolled onto his side normally. Dr. Krensky, who had been monitoring from his office, arrived to find 4 alien researchers frantically trying to reorganize floating equipment while 6 humans slept peacefully on their mats surrounded by the wreckage of what had been a carefully controlled scientific study. "Status report?" he asked calmly. "Professor," Quinn said, his pale blue skin now showing stress patterns, "we have documented the most severe case of species-wide neurological dysfunction in recorded scientific history. These subjects have experienced hallucinations, motor system failures, unconscious system manipulation, linguistic processing overload, complete paralysis, and gravitational displacement trauma, all while maintaining the appearance of normal sleep." Dr. Krensky looked around the destroyed laboratory, then at the 6 peacefully sleeping humans who remained completely unaware of the chaos they had caused. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for a very long explanation about human sleep." The emergency session of the Galactic University Council convened at 800 hours, 3 days after what was being called the Sleep Laboratory Incident. The council chamber, designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of species, had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Quinn stood at the central podium, his research data displayed on holographic screens around the room, while council members from across the galaxy listened with growing alarm. "Honorable council members," Quinn began, his voice carrying the weight of what he believed to be a momentous scientific discovery, "we have uncovered evidence of a previously unknown neurological epidemic affecting the entire human species." The holographic displays showed brain scans, behavioral recordings, and damage assessments from the laboratory. Council members shifted uncomfortably as they watched footage of humans performing impossible physical feats while unconscious, manipulating complex systems with their eyes closed and speaking in linguistic patterns that overloaded translation equipment. "The condition appears to affect 100% of observed human subjects," Nex added, his crystalline structure projecting additional data. "Symptoms include temporary paralysis, violent hallucinations, unconscious system manipulation, and complete dissociation from normal cognitive function." Chancellor Vorth, a dignified Centaurian with impressive cranial ridges, leaned forward in his floating chair. "You are suggesting that every human in the galaxy suffers from severe neurological dysfunction?" "Not dysfunction, Chancellor," Borax corrected, their multiple voices speaking in unison. "Evolution. We believe humans have developed these conditions as survival mechanisms during their evolution on the dangerous planet Earth. However, the symptoms pose significant risks in civilized space environments." Tala stepped forward, her seasonal fur now completely winter-thick. "Our research indicates that humans experience these episodes daily, suggesting their brains require this form of extreme neurological activity to maintain basic function. It is unlike anything documented in galactic medical literature." The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as representatives discussed the implications. Dr. Yelan, the station's chief medical officer and a respected Rigelian physician, requested permission to speak. "Council members, if these findings are accurate, we may need to reconsider human integration into mixed species environments. The safety risks are substantial." "The humans manipulated station life support systems while unconscious," Quinn emphasized, displaying recordings of Roy's gravitational adjustments. "They demonstrate enhanced physical capabilities during these episodes, potentially making them dangerous to other species who cannot match their unconscious abilities." Chancellor Vorth studied the data with growing concern. "What do you recommend?" "Immediate medical intervention protocols," Quinn replied. "We should begin developing treatment programs to help humans manage these conditions. They may not even realize the severity of their symptoms." "Additionally," Nex suggested, "we recommend temporary isolation procedures for human residents during their sleep cycles to prevent further incidents." The discussion continued for 2 hours as council members debated quarantine procedures, medical interventions, and the implications for human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. Messages were sent to other university stations and diplomatic outposts, warning of the newly discovered human sleep syndrome. Meanwhile, in the residential quarters, the humans had noticed some strange changes. Tom found that other species now avoided the corridors during evening hours. Maya discovered that her Alterian lab partner had requested a schedule change to avoid working with her during high-risk periods. Dev was confused when his alien friends stopped inviting him to social gatherings that occurred after 2200 hours. "It's like they think we're going to explode or something," Emma complained to Roy as they sat in the mostly empty cafeteria. "Dr. Yilan asked me 3 times today if I was feeling neurologically stable," Roy replied. "I have no idea what that even means." The situation escalated when security protocols were quietly implemented requiring human residents to check in, with medical staff before and after sleep periods. Alien residents began requesting room transfers to different sections of the station, and several submitted formal complaints about unsafe living conditions. Dr. Krensky watched these developments with growing horror. He had tried to explain to Quinn and the research team that human sleep behaviors were normal, but they had already submitted their emergency findings to the university administration and various scientific journals. The preliminary reports were spreading through academic networks faster than he could correct them. "Professor," Quinn said, when Dr. Krensky called an emergency meeting with the research team, "we understand your desire to protect your species, but denying the severity of this condition will not help human medical outcomes." "These are not medical conditions," Dr. Krensky tried again. "Sleepwalking, sleep-talking, dreams, and sleep paralysis are normal variations in human sleep patterns." "With respect, Professor," Tala replied, "our documentation clearly shows humans performing impossible physical feats, accessing secure systems, and communicating with invisible entities. These cannot be considered normal biological functions." The breaking point came when the Galactic Health Organization issued a preliminary advisory recommending that space stations implement Deathworlder sleep safety protocols until further research could be completed. The advisory suggested that human residents should sleep in monitored isolation chambers and receive regular neurological evaluations. Dr. Krensky found himself in the unusual position of trying to convince the galaxy's leading medical authorities that his species was not suffering from a previously unknown form of space madness. The irony was not lost on him that humans were being considered too dangerous for space habitation because of how they slept. The situation reached crisis levels when Tom was approached by Dr. Yilan with a proposed treatment schedule involving neurological stabilizers and sleep cycle regulation therapy. "Treatment for what?" Tom asked, completely baffled. "Your condition, of course," Dr. Yilan replied gently. "The unconscious navigation episodes, the complex task performance while neurologically inactive. We want to help you manage these symptoms." That evening, the human residents held their own emergency meeting in the recreation lounge. Dr. Krensky joined them, looking haggard from days of trying to explain human sleep to increasingly concerned alien administrators. "So let me get this straight," Ben said. "The entire galaxy now thinks we're mentally unstable because we have normal dreams. And because Roy sleepwalked to the environmental controls," Emma added. "And because Zoe talks in her sleep," Maya continued. "And because I had sleep paralysis one time," Ben finished. Dr. Krensky nodded wearily. "The research team has convinced the university administration that you're all suffering from severe neurological disorders. They're proposing medical treatment protocols." "For sleeping," Tom said slowly. "For sleeping," Dr. Krensky confirmed. The humans looked at each other in stunned silence as the full scope of the misunderstanding became clear. Somewhere in the station, 4 well-meaning alien researchers were preparing medical intervention protocols for the terrible affliction of human sleep, while the rest of the galaxy prepared to treat an entire species for the crime of having interesting dreams. "This," Roy said finally, "is either the dumbest or most hilarious thing that has ever happened in the history of interstellar relations." None of them realized yet that it was about to become both. The main assembly hall of Galactic University Station had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from 12 species filled the curved seating areas, while holographic displays showed real-time connections to university stations across 3 sectors of the galaxy. At the center of it all, Dr. Krensky stood with his 6 human volunteers, facing what appeared to be an intervention for an entire species. Chancellor Vorth called the assembly to order with formal gravity. "We are here to address the medical crisis discovered by our xenobiology research team. The condition appears to affect all observed humans and poses significant safety concerns for mixed species environments." Quinn rose from his seat in the front row, his research datapad glowing with compiled evidence. "Chancellor, our documentation shows consistent patterns of neurological dysfunction affecting 100% of human subjects during sleep cycles. We have prepared treatment recommendations." "Before we discuss treatment," Dr. Krensky interrupted, "I think we should demonstrate exactly what you've been observing." He gestured to Tom, who stepped forward with a slight grin. "Last Tuesday night, I got up and made pancakes while asleep. Would you like to know why?" The assembly fell silent. Chancellor Vorth's cranial ridges deepened with concern. "Please explain." "Because I was hungry and I was dreaming about breakfast," Tom said simply. "Sometimes humans do things in our sleep that connect to what we're dreaming about. It's called sleepwalking, and it happens to maybe 10% of our population occasionally." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as species representatives processed this information through their translators. Maya stepped forward next. "I have vivid dreams sometimes. In my dreams, I might be fighting monsters or running from danger. My body responds to the dreams by moving around. It's completely normal for humans." "Normal?" Dr. Yilan called out from the medical section. "You exhibited enhanced physical capabilities and violent behavior while unconscious." "Enhanced nothing," Emma laughed, joining Maya. "I study martial arts as a hobby. When I dream about practicing, my muscle memory takes over. I'm not actually stronger when I'm asleep. I'm just using skills I already have." Zoe bounced forward with characteristic energy. "And the language thing? I'm a linguistics researcher. I spend all day thinking about different languages. When I dream, my brain processes all that information. Sometimes it comes out as sleep talking in whatever languages I was studying that day." "The translation systems failed," Nex pointed out, his crystalline structure flickering with confusion. "Because I was mixing grammar structures from incompatible language families while unconscious," Zoe explained patiently. "My dreaming brain doesn't worry about making sense to translators." Ben took a deep breath before addressing the assembly. "Sleep paralysis happens when your mind wakes up before your body does. It's scary when it happens, but it's not dangerous. My brain was preventing my body from acting out dreams, which is actually a protective function." Finally, Roy stepped forward. "And I adjusted the gravity controls because I work with those systems every day, and I was dreaming about fixing a malfunction. My hands knew how to operate the controls even while I was asleep." The assembly hall erupted in discussions as representatives tried to process this information. Dr. Krensky raised his hand for attention. "What my students observed and documented with scientific precision are normal variations in human sleep. Patterns," he explained. "Humans experience complex dreams, and sometimes our bodies respond to those dreams. We call them things like sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep paralysis, and RM behavior disorder. They're not diseases or neurological dysfunction. They're just how human brains process information during rest." Chancellor Vorth looked between the human volunteers and the research team. "You are saying these behaviors are intentional biological functions?" "Not intentional, but normal," Dr. Krensky clarified. "Human sleep is active. Our brains don't just shut down for maintenance like most species. We dream, process memories, solve problems, and sometimes our bodies react to what's happening in our minds." Quinn stood up slowly, his datapad forgotten in his hands. "But the documentation clearly shows impossible physical feats, system manipulation while unconscious, communication with non-existent entities." "Dreams," Maya said gently. We were interacting with our dreams, not with invisible entities or using magical powers. The realization spread through the assembly like a wave as representatives began to understand the scope of the misunderstanding. Tala's ears drooped with embarrassment. Borax's collective voices murmured in harmonious confusion. Nex's crystalline structure dimmed as he processed the implications. So when Subject 1 performed aerial combat maneuvers, Nex said slowly, she was dreaming about fighting? Probably, Emma confirmed. I dream about martial arts practice fairly regularly. And when Subject 2 accessed environmental controls, Borax continued, he was dreaming about his work responsibilities? Roy nodded. I've had that exact dream dozens of times. Usually I'm trying to fix some impossible malfunction. Dr. Yilan stood up from the medical section, his expression shifting from concern to fascination. Are you telling us that human neural activity during sleep is sophisticated enough to access learned skills and memories while maintaining motor function? Sometimes, Dr. Krensky confirmed. Human sleep isn't passive like most species. Our brains remain highly active, processing the day's experiences, consolidating memories, and working through problems. Sometimes that mental activity translates into physical responses. The assembly fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. Chancellor Vorth was the first to speak. Your species continues conscious-level neural processing during rest periods? We call it dreaming, Tom said. Most humans dream several times each night. We experience entire scenarios, conversations, adventures, and problems to solve. Our sleeping minds are almost as active as our waking minds. Impossible, breathed Dr. Yilan. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. Most species reduce neural activity by 70 to 90% during rest cycles. Humans reduce activity by maybe 20%, Dr. Krensky explained. We evolved on a planet where constant vigilance was necessary for survival. Even our sleep patterns reflect that evolutionary pressure. Quinn finally found his voice, though it carried a note of awe rather than concern. You mean human sleep represents an advanced form of neural activity rather than a basic biological function? I suppose you could look at it that way, Maya said. We essentially run complex simulations in our minds every night. Sometimes our bodies respond to those simulations. The academic excitement in the room was now palpable. Representatives leaned forward in their seats, and the holographic connections showed similar reactions from observers across the galaxy. This changes everything, Tala whispered, her winter fur bristling with excitement. We were studying what we thought was simple biological maintenance, but we discovered that humans have evolved the most sophisticated sleep patterns in known space. Your species literally practices and problem solves while unconscious, Nexi added, his crystalline structure now glowing brightly with fascination. The applications for learning and skill development could be revolutionary. Borax's collective voices spoke in harmony. We have been trying to treat an advanced cognitive ability as a medical disorder. Dr. Krensky smiled at his students. Now you understand why I tried to warn you that humans are never as simple as they seem. Chancellor Vorth called for order as excited discussions broke out across the assembly. It appears we owe the human residents of this station a significant apology. The medical protocols and safety restrictions will be immediately rescinded. Actually, Quinn said, standing up with renewed academic enthusiasm, we would like to request permission to continue our research, but now we want to study human dreams themselves, not treat them as disorders. The 6 human volunteers looked at each other and began laughing. You want to study our dreams? Emma asked. The most complex and unpredictable aspect of human consciousness? Roy added. Good luck with that, Ben said, grinning. Zoe clapped her hands together. Oh, this should be interesting. Wait until you experience a human nightmare. Or a really weird dream about flying purple elephants, Maya added. Or the one where you're late for an exam in a class you never attended, Tom finished. The alien researchers looked at each other with growing excitement and trepidation as they realized they had just volunteered to study the most chaotic and unpredictable aspect of the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. 3 months later, Quinn submitted his doctoral thesis titled The Magnificent Madness of Deathworlder Rest: How Humans Conquered Sleep Itself. The research had expanded far beyond its original scope, as the team documented the incredible complexity of human dream states, the problem-solving capabilities of sleeping human minds, and the physical skills that could be accessed during sleep. The study became legendary throughout galactic academic circles, not just for its scientific discoveries, but for the cautionary tale it represented about assuming any aspect of human biology was simple or straightforward. Dr. Krensky kept a copy of the original research proposal on his office wall, along with photos from the disastrous sleepover experiment. Whenever new students asked to study basic human biological functions, he would point to the pictures of floating alien researchers and sleeping humans surrounded by destroyed equipment. Remember, he would tell them, humans don't do anything the simple way, not even sleeping. The human volunteers became minor celebrities on the station, regularly invited to speak at academic conferences about the complexity of their sleep patterns. They had become living proof that even the most mundane human activities could revolutionize scientific understanding. And somewhere in the galaxy, other research teams were beginning to investigate human dreams, completely unaware that they were about to discover that the sleeping human mind was capable of mathematical breakthroughs, artistic inspiration, and occasionally coming up with solutions to problems that had puzzled scientists for centuries. After all, humans had conquered their dangerous homeworld by refusing to let even unconsciousness slow them down. Why would their dreams be any less remarkable than the rest of their impossible existence?